Okay, first things first with the Wimshurst machine, we're gonna be cutting the two big rotating plates, and what this is 1/8 inch clear acrylic, and we have to cut two 14-inch circles out of that. Now, I have a ductwork cutter that works pissa on metal, and it does work on this, but unfortunately it only goes up to 12 inches. So the only thing I had that was able to get me the distance I needed for a circle cutter was this little circle and router attachment I have for my Dremel here. And as you can see, I already cut one out, and it works pretty good. It'll cut through, it'll make the plastic a little bit crispy around the edge. Well, these are just like the chips. Even though these feel like and look like they're melted, it actually cuts. It doesn't melt. And the bit that I have in there, I don't know if I can zoom up on it a little bit here. See, it kind of looks like a drill bit with a really long spiral on it. And what that is labeled as their multi-purpose bit, number 561. And it seemed to work pretty good. I usually use one of those little Jacob style chucks that they have for these, but I have to put this into the collet because that's the only thing I can get it tight enough to make sure that this thing doesn't move. And I'm running it on, mine goes from 1 to 10. I think the new ones go from like 0 to 35. What the hell that means, I don't know. But I have it on 8, so that's roughly 3/4 of the way through. So if I put it up any higher, it won't cut, it'll want to burn. And the way this is set up, it has a little, this is actually just a finish nail, and this actually came with the kit as a finish nail as the pivot. So let's get to cutting this second one. I have to make the center hole for it, so measure that out. This sheet was cut off a larger, I think it's 4x6 sheet, just to make it more manageable. And I figured out I could get 2 holes in here, so let's just center it here. Doesn't have to be perfect because I know I have enough on the end. I just want to make sure that I got enough. Now I have that little finish nail in this drill here. I'm going to drill the hole with a finish nail so that way it's perfectly tight. Sure, I'm in that hole pretty nice. Now that's nice and secure. The only thing that kind of gets in the way with this is the cord. When you turn this, it'll get hung up on the corner. That's the only thing I don't like. But I need, if I use like a wood backing plate, in other words, just put a piece of plywood down and cut the circle on the plywood, what will actually happen is the heat that's generated by the bit will have nowhere to go, and it'll actually melt the plastic to the wood. So I need an open air area. So I'm only going to be able to cut about 1/4 of the way, turn, 1/4 of the way, turn, and 1/4 of the way to get the full circle. Now, the key to this is to go slow. You're not in a race. Take your time and do it. If you go too fast, what will happen is that bit will actually bend as you put pressure on it, and you'll end up with a wavy line as you go around. Ask me how I know that. So I have enough swing to do from here to here, a little less than half, probably about a third of the way actually. So I'm going to turn it on, plunge, and then we'll go around. There you go. Perfect circle. And no really deviations on the curvature. I mean, it's not, you know, it's not machined round, but it's perfectly acceptable for what we're doing. Now I'll just take a deburr and just get rid of the edges, chamfer the edges. Oop, let's put a scratch in it. Put another scratch in it. Ah! I'll deburr that other one. This one I put a gouge in. Oh well. It's not too bad. I get a little bit of a scratch right there. There's a reason why I'm peeling this off now, and that's because we have to stick a bunch of aluminum pads to this. So that's going to be the next step. Basically going to get the discs all set up first, do the boring stuff first, and then we'll get to the base and the rest of the machine. I wouldn't say boring, time consuming, pain in the ass. Something you would pay somebody else to do. That's not too bad. The leftover stuff right there, but nice and clear. I got a few little small scratches here and there, and nothing that's going to affect the operation of it. It's more of a looks thing. And we have a center hole that we're going to enlarge later on to be able to take our axle for this. So let's get to the fun part of cutting those discs and figure out how many I'm going to put on this. I think in the actual plans they use 16, but the more you use, the actual longer spark you'll get. So I might bump that up a little bit. Depends on how much of a pain in the butt it is to cut those. So put these aside in a safe place for now and get to the next step. Alright, now that we got our disc cut out, I know it's kind of hard to see there because it's clear, but now that we got these cut out, it's time for the monotonous part of the build. And what we have to do is cut our sectors that are going to be placed around this disc, or on both discs actually, only on one side. Now what I'm going to use to do that is good old metal tape. Now there are 3 versions of this that I'm aware of. The one that you want to use, which is just the straight adhesive backed one. There is also another version. If you look at it, it's a little thicker, like the roll is thicker, and instead of just straight adhesive on the back, it has like a gray coating, and that's duct sealer on the back of that. You don't want to use that. And then there's also another version of this that'll have a checkered crisscross pattern in it. What those are fiberglass reinforcing ribs. You don't want to use that either. You want to use just a straight regular silver tape. But we have to make a pattern for this to be able to cut our sectors. And just saved you the time of watching me draw a circle. But all I did was take 4 pieces of computer paper, tape them together to be able to get over 14 inches. Used a little compass, which will actually only gave me about an 11.5 inch circle, but I drew a circle, split it into 4 quadrants, and took my protractor here and marked off 15 degrees on half of it, every 15 degrees on half of the circle, and then took a straight edge and continued those lines off to the other side. That gives me a placement pattern for the sectors when I put them on. Now you have a decision to make whether you want in the plans themselves. I believe they use 16 sectors, which will end up being about this big. I just shaded them just kind of so they show up a little bit more here. Which they end up being about this big, and they'll be placed for me every other line, pretty much like that is what they'll end up looking like. Now supposedly, according to the book and other sources, the larger this wheel and the more sectors you have on there, the larger the spark and the larger voltage you can get out of it. So I'm going to add 8 more of these sectors, which is going to obviously reduce the size of these. So they do have the dimensions of these in the plans, so I'm just going to halve them and use those as my dimensions. Now, this is the very, very monotonous part, so you don't want to do it on a day when you're pissed off. You want a day when you can sit down, take your time, and do it. You want lots of coffee, and you want gummy bears. Buy gummy bears. Gummy bears are delicious, number one, and no matter how pissed off you are, if you eat a gummy bear, it'll make you happy. So, I'm going to make the new sectors in a piece of paper first to get the size, and then we're going to transfer that to a piece of sheet styrene, which you might know under the name of Plastruct or Plasticard. It's basically just sheet plastic. And I'll trace it, I'll make it out of paper, and I'll trace it out on this, and then we'll cut it out on this, and that'll be our master that we'll be able to cut our foil pieces out of. Because I'm going to do it with an X-Acto knife, so that way there I can just put it down on the foil and trace it out with the knife. So first of all, we're going to have the dimensions that they called out in the book. So let me get rid of this so you can see what I'm doing here. And they want 3.5 inches long, which we can still keep. Let's see if we can zoom in on this a little bit better. It's a little crooked, but that's okay. So we got our 3.5 inches that we're going to be using here, and our small end, 3/8 of an inch. So 3/8 divided by 2 divided by 2, 0.9375, which I have, pretty sure I have these already set at that. Yep, I do. So this is just a compass. So we'll put our edge against the line there. And I absolutely suck at using a compass, but we'll try to draw ourselves kind of a half-hearted circle here. And then the big end, 1.125. Wait, 1, 2, 5. And this is a larger dimension. Doesn't have to be perfect, but just a general thing. And we'll again eyeball that with the line. And using my sucky compass drawing skills here. Swear to God, the last time I used one of these was in a drafting class in high school. And we'll take the largest outside edge and connect it with the largest outside edge here. Now, we'll fold paper in half. And cut out that shape. And now we have 2. So with those 2, we can just double check placement real quick and make sure we're happy with that. And that looks pretty good. You got about 1 inch of clearance in between them. If we were to use the ones that they had in the original plans here, we have about 1.5 inches clearance between those. So we're a little bit closer, but we're going to have a lot more of them. So now I can just take this and transfer it to my styrene block. And there you have your pattern. Now the easiest way to cut this out is I'm going to be using these, which are from my EMT days. These are bandage scissors. They have a kind of little nub over here so you can cut bandages against the skin you don't stab somebody with, but they've got a lot of leverage to them. You can see they're bent and they fold right here, so it'll make easy work of this plastic stuff. There's also a thing called trauma shears, which are bigger, and those will actually cut through a coin. The only problem is the teeth of them are serrated. These are made to cut through jeans and heavy clothing, but these bandage scissors work great on this plastic. You can go through it with a knife too. You'll just have to score it a few times and you can actually snap it out. And there's our master right there that we're going to use to cut it out. Let me grab a sanding stick real quick. These are just flexi files. They're just a flexible sanding stick. Basically the same thing they sell at beauty stores for nails and stuff. I have a lot of this stuff laying around because I build a lot of scale models and stuff, but we'll just make sure the edge is nice radius on it. And there's our complete master. This is what we're going to use to cut all of our other ones with. Alright, now we have our master. I tried cutting these out tracing it with an X-Acto knife, and it does work. It just, if you hit it wrong, it'll tear, and it kind of takes a while to go through this and the backing. It can be done that way, but the easiest way that I found to do it is take a piece, fold it in half, take your master, and I've been able to get 3 out of a piece, and we have it folded over, so we'll get 6 out of our cuts. So, and if you just take just a regular pencil, just make sure it's not sharp, make sure it's actually a little rounded, because you're not actually drawing. Oops. You're not actually drawing on the piece, you're actually indenting and basically scribing a line in it. And there's a 3 right there, and then with just a sharp pair of scissors, we get 2 for the price of 1. So let me get all those squared away. So we're going to need at least 24 per section, so 48. So I'll probably do a little bit more. So we'll probably end up with somewhere around 52 or so of these, in case I do screw up. So let me finish those up, and then we'll place them. Alright, I have that layout here. I don't know if you can see, but I made a mark here, a set distance away from the edge, so that is how far the sectors are going to reach out. I took that nail that we use in the Dremel tool, and I drove it into my workbench here to be able to hold this steady while I move it around. And I also took a piece of tape and taped down an edge, so that way the paper is attached to it, and I can kind of spin this as I go. And all we're going to do is peel off our backing, make sure there's no debris or anything on here, and by eye center this tip in line with this line, and then as we hold this tip, it's only going to be attached at that one point. We can move it around until we center up that other side, and then we'll be able to push it down with our finger. And after we're all done, we'll get a nice piece of plastic, and we'll burnish everything down to get rid of any of any ripples or anything in there. So just using an X-Acto knife to separate the backing from the tape. those sectors on there, I need to burnish them down and even out any bubbles or wrinkles that are in them. It's going to take a regular plastic Bic pen. Just rub it up right over it with some downward pressure. Okay, here's the finished disc. You can see we're pretty smooth. So here's one, and here's the other. So basically they're going to be back to back, like that. And they'll spin in opposite directions.